Welcome back to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. I'm Marcus, founder of AdCloud, where we help franchise owners scale smarter, not louder. Today, we're talking about something a lot of franchisees don't want to hear. The franchise playbook isn't going to save you. Don't get me wrong, HQ's got the brand, the templates, the tone of voice, but if you're expecting those generic graphics and plug and play posts to pack your books, it's not going to happen. And here to help me call it out in the most loving way possible is our creative director, Mckenzie.
All right, Marcus, let's get into this one. I think, it seems like franchisees are handed this kind of shiny, polished playbook, and suddenly they think it's a done deal. I'm going to have a successful business. Why do you think so many owners treat it like it's a full-blown growth strategy and call it a day?
I think that oftentimes in the franchising world, many franchisees are kind of sold this semi-absentee model where they come in and it's all done for them. You have to think a lot of franchisees come from corporate America. Their entire lives have stuck to a strict schedule. Entrepreneurship and business owner is none of that. It is uncontrolled chaos at all times, right? And so they come from corporate America, the 9 to 5, the very structured, this is what I'm going to do and how I do it. When you pitch a semi-absentee franchise model, you're naturally like, okay, so I can potentially still keep my job in corporate America. They lock into that. And of course, they're sold like, hey, we're going to create some social posts for you. We're going to have this playbook and brand book, and the gates are going to open up and everyone's going to come in. And that's just not how it works. That content, especially in franchising, what happens is when you look at the algorithms, right? Let's say you're a 100 location franchise, everyone's posting the exact same caption, creative. The algorithm picks up on that and says, okay, there's 100 versions of this same content. Why am I going to promote one over the other? This is not unique. This is just generated content globally. Like, it's smart enough to understand those things. And that is where the fault line happens. It happens the same on the sites, franchise models, because when you look at like the corporates, now this doesn't go for larger brands like F45 and things in that nature where they have massive corporate teams, but a lot of franchise HQs, they have fairly small executive teams and things in that nature. And so they try to do the duplication process, build it once and just duplicate. So like their web pages, they're all the same, except it may say, this brand Nashville and this brand Murfreesboro, or this, whatever that is, but all the content's exactly the same. None of it's localized, none of it's custom. And so of course, Google dings you on that. And it's like, well, this is just duplicated content. This isn't actually valuable to anyone. No one's actually taking the time to look into it. And so that type of what I consider like cheap content is easy to scale, but it will hurt you in the long run. You're going to start to see those things kind of dive down. You're going to see your Google business analytics start to really take a dip because that content is not unique. And also, you're not looking at what's performing and then amplifying those things and creating something custom around that.
So what exactly do you think is missing from this, marketing playbook that headquarters gives you? I know they kind of hand you some pretty logos, maybe a Canva post or two, maybe an old overused email marketing system, but what's actually lacking when it comes to getting real people in the door?
I think when you really dial it in, it's the ability to look at your demographics, look at locality, and create content and messaging around that, but also spend money. At the end of the day, you can do all the organic things that you want. We are far past, and most people have heard me say this, we're far past the build it and they will come. Organic reach right now is on social, Meta, Instagram, is like maybe less than 1% for your post. So, I mean, it's for a business page. So like when you look at that, if you have not built out in your plan, and I think in the franchising world, this happens far more often than it should. If you do not have a big ad spend marketing budget for at least the first 12 months, you're going to probably run into some trouble. Now, that's probably not across the board. There are some areas like Metro Atlanta, things in that nature where you can get away. It's so dense. But if you're on the West Coast and your cost per lead is going to be triple that of someone in kind of the central US, on the East Coast, things in that nature, you have to have that budget. And so many times we see that franchise owners come in and they've invested their 401ks, they've done all this stuff, then they're like, okay, I want to spend $1,000 a month. That's just not a big enough spend to drive the amount of awareness and growth that you need to do it. So first is stop looking at your marketing, whether you're working with an agency or you're trying to do it yourself, as like this expenditure that can just come one day and go the next. It's a long-term investment, just like your business is. It is a long-term investment that you need to always have, no matter what. But content and learning from the data, right? In the beginning, you're going to post things as you don't really know how people in your area are going to engage. We've seen people in North Carolina engage with a specific piece of content, and then people in Texas not engage with that content and engage with something else. So it's vast. It's never one-to-one, even if it's at the same brand. So looking at the data and saying, okay, people liked this more. Let me create more video content based around that because that's what they liked. Rather, what we see more often is people just post it and cross their fingers and hope that it's doing well. And they just continue that rat wheel, for lack of a better term, of just going round and round. And then 6-8 months down the road, when they're not turning a profit, it becomes a much bigger issue. And now you're starting at day one again because you haven't learned anything in 6 months. You've just throw up a prayer and hope that everything kind of works.
So what would you say is like the biggest differences between if you were to just take this kind of headquarters playbook and just post what they tell you to post, run the ads they tell you to run, that they say for every franchise, if you were to just take that and then say you take a more personalized approach where you hire an agency or you're doing it yourself, what's the main differences between the two of if you just take this playbook, hope for the best, or if you actually buckle down and focus on your specific location? What would be those drastic differences?
But the primary difference, I think, is demographics and data. I think that a playbook that likely was created, 4 or 5 years ago is not going to really speak to your specific demographic. It's not going to be localized. Data is everything. No, any business that we start over here at AdCloud, we always look at, you do your prereq, right? Like, okay, what people are here, what are they buying, what are the interests, what are the competitors, who are the amplifier brands, things in that nature. But once you start to run things and run ads and spend money, you have to quickly understand what's engaging and what's not, and be able to curate new content based on that really quickly. Like, we're not talking about 30 days, we're talking 72 hours, and make the pivot. Otherwise, you're going to spend your budget. And so those playbooks are a guide. I'm not saying playbooks are bad. I actually think playbooks are good. I think the problem is that we become so reliant on the playbook to do the work. It's just a blueprint of like, hey, here's what you could do. Here's the colors you should use. Here's the logo. The brand books essentially evolved into what we call now as a playbook. It was logos. Don't stretch the logo out. And those things are great because it does give guideline to what the brand believes, the messaging, the pillars, all of those things. But we became kind of handicapped by like, well, this can do it all. Like, I'm just going to copy and paste instead of curating my own and coming up with that. And that is where we're seeing this downfall, I think, in brands where they have done that. And then they're like, oh man, why is this not working? And 9 times out of 10, they wait until it's too late, either because they didn't want to invest the money to get expert help, or they just didn't know. And notice this, most people coming from corporate America have no idea. I think there's a lot of them that are honest about that. I've had many come to me and say, look, I know zero about marketing. I don't know anything, and that's why we need you. And if you can come to that realization by yourself, I think that's great. You're light years ahead, but there are some, unfortunately, that are like, I can figure this out. Because most franchise brands, they need to be cutting $500,000 to $700,000 a year if they want to make profit. Maybe have multiple employees and things in that nature. And that's really hard to learn overnight from a marketing aspect. And 9 times out of 10, if you are focused on that, you're mismanaging your staff and you're leaving money on the table in operations and things in that nature. I just think that is one of the biggest things, but looking at the data and understanding it, and that is a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to learn overnight.
So let's go back just a little bit.
Mhm.
You talked about kind of localizing your strategy. What does that actually look like? Because, making it local, sure, that sounds great. But
Yeah.
what does that actually mean for a franchise who wants to grow without getting yelled at by brand compliance?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always, it's a little bit of a gray area and fine line to walk. Now, I think the work is on both sides. I think that headquarters, corporate franchise, like they have to learn and understand to be a little bit more lenient on what that is, because there is a locality that you need to compete in these markets, because so many people and so many tools have fast tracked it. There has to be a little bit more leniency versus like big brother over, helicopter mom watching you and saying, hey, don't do that. That's one too many periods, right? We see that constantly, where sometimes you have to let that flex and see, like, if what they do drives growth, who really cares, right? Like, let it happen. And corporate, if you're listening, you might learn something, right? Like, you might learn something from that franchise owner who pushed the boundary a little bit and tested those things. When I go into conversations with our corporate partners, that is one of the first things we talk about is like, listen, we want to come in, but we want to be able to push the boundary a little bit, because if you're bringing us in, likely what you've been doing hasn't been working. So we don't want to come in and just reinvent the wheel and do the same thing. Let us push the boundary and see what is possible, what can we do. It comes down to like events that are taking place, posting about those things, amplifying, those things. When it comes to Google business profiles, the more local you can get, the better. Optimizing those, the posts can be far more local to pick up those keywords. There's so much that you can do, but even with your social posts, tagging like your city that you're in, finding local partnerships and doing joint promotions. There's so much you can do from a local level, but most people just do the spray and pray and like, we're just going to globalize this thing. And consumers don't necessarily want that. And consumers interact far differently to content in different areas. And I think that is where, for example, we just ran a test actually with a brand that we manage called Beam Light Sauna. They're in Colorado. They have this, where their studio set behind them is absolutely beautiful. And historically, they had been running this generic creative that was provided. It was a great video. It was good video. It wasn't to knock the video, but they ended up having someone come and do drone footage. Absolutely like beautiful. The drone comes down and goes into the studio, shows it right. We launched the test. The cost per lead went down almost 70% just by changing the create. We didn't change copy. We didn't change anything else. And, when you go to answer the question, why? Well, because if you're local, you know that mountain scenery, that. So you immediately are like, well, this is home.
Well, and especially for like a sauna, I would think that would be, it's the vibe, right? Like
Yeah, on social, it's disruptive marketing, right?
Mhm.
We're trying to get you to stop.
Right.
And if I live there and I know that's my town and
Mhm.
it comes up in my feed, I'm naturally going to be like, oh, wait,
Right.
I know where that's at. I know that
Right.
scene or scenery. I wish for every partner we have, I wish I could like send out a drone team now. That's a vast difference, which allows their budget to go much farther. And when you can do that, you can say, hey, okay, we can spend $2,000 a month, but now it's going to go much farther than it was with a 70% decrease. It makes a big difference to localize that and find an agency that will help you kind of guide you to do that. And so on our side, we try to say like, we can't be there. I can't go to all of these locations, but I can say hire a team to shoot this, and here's what you should shoot, and here's what we're seeing work. And those things make a big difference.
Well, and I'm sitting here thinking too, like, I know, we kind of always use the decas for examples. Like, each deca has different staff, a different location, it's not all the same. So if I'm looking to go get lash extensions, if I see one in Texas, I'm not really going to care about what their staff looks like. I want to know what the one that I'm booking at is going to look like. Who works there? What are their reviews like? So I would think that, making it really specific to your location, not just the brand, it's your location. I feel like that's two different things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And pull the data, understand
Right.
like who your clients are, what are their age
Absolutely.
gaps. Look, if you pull your data, and historically you've been marketing to 18 to 25-year-olds, and you pull your data
Right.
and 90% of your clients are 45 to 55,
Exactly.
what
What are
you
you
can
doing?
just go ahead and cut out, like
Right.
hone in on that. There's plenty of people in that area. We do marketing for some nail salons, and it's very similar. Like their clientele, it should be like, oh, we should target like the younger age group and all of those things. But when you really think about it, it's the older demographic that goes in. They are more recurrent, right? Like we all know, like our grandmothers, right? It's clockwork. And those are the clients you want for longevity, not the 18-year-old that's like, hey, I want to get it now because I've got prom, right? Like I got prom, but then I'll see you in like 10 years. So like you have to really think about those metrics and how they affect the longevity of your business. Do you want the one-off client or do you want the long-term member? And everything you do, everything points back to data. If you have the data and can look at the data and understand it, that's going to help you. That should guide every decision, whether your opinion is opposite of the data or not. Just follow the data and let that, like, egos aside, whatever the data says, and just do that, and you should be good.
Right. So I know you have, I hear it every week, a lot of calls with new franchisees, that are maybe starting to realize that this playbook isn't everything that they need. Where do they start? What would you tell them? What's the first thing that they need to do to add on to this playbook?
Yeah, I think if you're in that stage where you're realizing that this isn't going to get you to the promised land, it's not going to get your business to being cash flow positive or wherever you are in the business stage, my biggest suggestion is reach out to someone, whether that's like us or some, to ask questions. You can call me, well, schedule a call. Call me anytime and just start the question. It doesn't mean that you have to engage with AdCloud or anything in that nature or that specific agency, but I think it's okay to start poking and prodding around and saying, if this is not working, if this is not getting you to where you want to be, or you can't see that trajectory, get an outside opinion to say, hey, maybe it's because of X, Y, and Z. If you have the knowledge and know how to look at the data, start there for sure. Pool all of your data, pool all of those things, and start to figure out, here is the people that are coming into the shop or studio. This is who they are. This is our demographic. This content is or isn't working across the board. If you can understand those things, then you can probably start to piece together whether you need an agency like AdCloud, or maybe there's something in between there that you can do or figure out on your own if you don't have the budget for that. But if you're like, I have the data and I have access to it, but I don't understand it, just reach out. You message us, email us, whatever that is, and we're happy to take a look at it and try to walk you through what we are seeing from that perspective. Because again, it's everything you need to know to move the business forward without just being in the dark and hoping that something's going to click or go viral. Take a moment, stop, look at your reporting, look at your demographics, look at the content you've posted. And when I say look at it, I mean go to Meta, go to the analytics tab and see how many people are actually engaging. How many people are actually clicking from those things? A view is nearly worthless, right? I would say click or comment. Those are the measurables, as long as they're commenting good things. If they're commenting, that a fairly good engagement, like how many people? And if it is a lot, then you need to start thinking, okay, why are we not targeting those people? Go and create an audience in Meta. It's fairly easy to do, of people who have engaged with your brand, engaged with your ads, engaged with your posts, clicked or liked or commented, and let that become your kind of really warm audience to start targeting after, instead of putting out this broad to everyone in the metro area that should potentially come to your business. Once you start to break those things down, you can really dial into those and start to leverage those things. But again, if you don't understand it and you feel like you've been staring at a screen all day, reach out to someone before it's too late. Because if you're not growing right now, it's not going to get any better until you kind of change some of those things. But look, the franchise playbook is a great tool, but it's not a full strategy, and it's definitely not a growth engine. If you're waiting on HQ to save the day with a few branded posts, a nationwide campaign, you're going to be waiting a while. I think franchise growth doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from showing up, testing, localizing, and owning your market. Thanks for listening to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. If this gave you a little push or a loving nudge to take more ownership of your local growth, hit the follow, leave a review, and send this to a franchise friend still riding the corporate coattails. Catch you next week.